Once a month, my supporters of this show and myself and a special guest have a Zoom meeting. It's not recorded, it's not posted, it's just private. It's between you guys, the guest, and myself. I do this because it means a lot for you guys who support me by showing me that this show means a lot to you. I love talking with you. I look at it as like a benefit for people that support the show, but it's really a benefit for me. I get to know you guys and have an off-the-record discussion with our guest. And, sometimes topics you don't want to necessarily have all the ins and outs discussed online, if you know what I mean. So to be in this group, please go to patreon.com/counterflow and donate $5 or more per month. And it gets you in this club. We do it once a month. It's a great time. It's great people. They're all smarter than me. So that's an upgrade from what you're used to. I can tell you that. The guests are always guests that people want to hear from. A lot of you guys will be familiar with many of the guests. Father Turbo's done it. Father Deacon Ananias has done it. David Patrick Carey's done it. My own priest, Father Ignatius, has done it. Father Moses McPherson's done it. It's a very good time, and I think you guys would enjoy it. If you love this content, please go to patreon.com/counterflow, $5 or more per month. Thank you.
You are now listening to the Counterflow Podcast, a place for dissonant voices and unapproved opinions.
You get split in half, but I call him the hologram brass. But I am the center inside the placenta of math. You clash with cyanide gas and die fast. Rhythmical equivalent of solids, liquid and gas. We smash your sinus with the power of Lord Titus. But I am the virus inside of the iris of Cyrus.
Here is your host and humble narrator, Buck Johnson.
What's up, you guys? Welcome back once again to the Counterflow Podcast. As always, I am your host and humble narrator, Buck Johnson, coming to you out of Lockhart, Texas. And today, my friend, Mano Elia, is on the show from Study of Stuff podcast, SOS Radio as well. I released an episode, maybe 6 weeks ago, something like that, where I was on his show. And he did such a great job with his production, his questions. The discussion was enjoyable. So I put that on as one of my episodes. I wanted to do that. So you probably, if you listen to that one, you can tell this guy's bright, has a lot of good things to say, and an interesting fella. So I said, Mano, come on my show now. And we get into, it's interesting, he was born into Orthodoxy, cradle Orthodox, which is not all that common in our areas at least. And then he ventured out of it into the occult, into the New Age, into what is called Hermeticism. And we get into a lot of that stuff. Some of these things are going to sound familiar. There's sort of a pop culture spirituality out there now. A lot of it's, let's say, more feminine than masculine. So you'll see a lot of the ladies on social media with moons and stars and planets and crystals and all of these things. So that's sort of the realm Mano is diving into. And Mano, I'm not knocking you by saying it's feminine. I'm just trying to get the people listening a general idea of where we're going with this. So we get into that, some subculture, some Orthodox Christianity, and Mano gets deep. You're going to have to hang on tight to follow this because he knows a lot and he says a lot in this interview. And without further ado, let's just get to it now. Mano Elia, welcome to the show, sir. How are you?
I'm very good. Thank you, Buck, for having me. I really appreciate this.
Yeah, last week I practiced Jason Miranchuk's last name before we started. This week I'm practicing yours. He's going to get a kick out of that when he hears it. And then I said his wrong and when I did my post-production intro. So I'm a work in progress, aren't we all? However, welcome to the show. This is your first time on here, and I'm a fan of your work, so I'm glad we could do this. I'll let you give yourself the intro that you think people should hear and know some things they want to know about you, and then we'll jump into some fascinating subjects.
My name is Mano Elia. I'm just some guy that does a podcast called The Study of Stuff. I started it a long time ago, but didn't really start taking it seriously until really about a year ago. I also have a radio show that we do on Sundays called SOS Radio. I'm just really some guy that's trying to explore my interests, which is why I called the show from the beginning, The Study of Stuff. And I'm a father, and I live in Mexico. And I don't know, that's it. And I'm a cradle Orthodox Christian. So I've come back to the faith. So that's a big part of my story.
Yes.
And a big part of my life.
Yeah, and by the way, for people listening, that Sunday radio show is a lot of fun. Are you about my age? How old are you?
I think I'm exactly your age. I'm November 77. I think you're earlier than
I'm
me.
January 77. Okay,
Yeah.
because our not that everyone born at that time is going to have the same musical interests, but ours are very aligned. And so I was a guest DJ, and some of our mutuals, as the kids call it, that are around our age, I can tell they're in the comments. They're loving the stuff too. It's a lot of underground stuff, punk rock, ska, even some goth rock and roll, that kind of thing. It's a lot of fun. So you guys, if any of that music strikes your fancy, tune into the Sunday night SOS radio. I think that's what we're calling it. And your nephew's your nephew's helping you do that too.
Yeah, man, he rides shotgun, and we're kind of building it. So yeah, thanks for pushing us. That was great, and having you on was awesome. I get a lot of comments about that still and requests, so we're gonna get you back on sometime soon.
Oh, cool. Okay, yeah, that was great. And just for people listening, there's all sorts of Orthodox, let's say, sounds, visuals, and stuff thrown in there throughout. When I was on it, we did a lot of Justin Marlar, who, of course, is famous for the Death to the World zine, some of his music, etc. So, again, just to plug that, I love it. And I think some of you guys listening will like it. So, Mano, you said Cradle Orthodox. Mm-hmm. That's a rarity, obviously. It's almost like I used to live in Austin, Texas, and everyone there said, when you meet someone, where are you from? Every once in a while, someone would go, I was born in Austin, and that's very rare. And I've found since becoming Orthodox that you usually say upon meeting people, especially our age, right? Not necessarily people that are elderly, but our age. When did you convert? What's your story? Where did you come from? How did you find Orthodoxy? So my point being, it's rare that we see people in the Gen X category as cradle Orthodox. Where were you raised? Was it? I think you've told me it was Greek Orthodox, but talk about some of that.
Yeah, I was born and raised in Toronto, Ontario. Born in a Greek household, so of course Greek Orthodox was my jurisdiction. A big part of my life in the first couple of years, for sure. So yeah, that's being Greek and being Orthodox is kind of goes hand in hand. It was like a common saying that you can't be a Greek without being Orthodox. Mm-hmm. It doesn't mean to say that a lot of Greek Orthodox people are practicing, right. Maybe properly is not a good way of saying it, but it's more of like an ethnic thing in a lot of ways, and that's how it was in my family. It was more of an ethnic thing, but there was a couple of blips in our lives in my early childhood where we took it a little bit more seriously. In particular, with my grandfather. My grandfather is a massive reason why I'm back, and he was a big part of me understanding the faith. So yeah, being cradle Orthodox is definitely interesting. You're correct. That's not so common, especially on the online Orthodox community that we're a part of. Definitely not common.
Yeah, two of the cities I lived in as a child were one Los Angeles, and then after that San Antonio, Texas. Both heavily Hispanic, and I might compare what you're saying to there. I would call those cities culturally Catholic, like the Hispanic areas, and it's not like they were going to Catholic church every Sunday. It's just like, I wasn't certainly, but I knew a bunch of Catholic stuff, if you will, or kind of cultural things because of that. But it's not like these people are going to recite when the schism happened and stuff like that and explain why they think that is,
Yeah, that's so true. But in my particular case, my father, big shout out to him, great dad. And he was very big on teaching us history, and I tell the story every once in a while. When I would go to bed, my dad would give me bedtime stories. He'd read me bedtime stories, but for me it was like Plato, Aristotle, this and that, and a big component of it also was Byzantine history. So he would just like read to me all this stuff. So when I do say ethnic and cultural Orthodox, there was a lot of that as well. So I had a decent understanding of it, but more of my understanding on the Eastern Orthodox history is more historical rather than like church fathers and what they had said. Mm-hmm. So it was a lot more of that. So I'm really lucky. My dad's fantastic like that.
Are your parents still practicing pretty heavily in Orthodoxy? Are they glad that you came back? What's that looking like for you?
Good question. Yes, they're still practicing very similar to how I described earlier. Yeah, they're really happy for a couple of reasons. One of the reasons for my dad is like I've come back to like the Greek stuff. He's kind of how he sees it, because a very big part of his philosophies and ideas. In terms of the faith, they do like that I'm back to it. I think they see a big difference and change in my personality, my appreciation for family, my appreciation for them. So they're very happy in that sense. But like I said, they're not like super religious. So my father and I will have some interesting conversations and debates on biblical matters.
That's fair.
So yeah, it's still a father-son relationship.
Got it. Yeah, I'm familiar. At some point, and I should thank our mutual friend Tommy Salmons. He had you on the Year Zero podcast, and I'm listening to that. And you just planted a few seeds here and there. And I'm like, wait, I got to know more about this. So that's kind of what kind of sparked my interest in discussing some of the things we're going to talk about. But you did mention there that as a teen, I believe, you strayed, if you will, from the church and started looking into some other occult type things. Talk about that.
Sure. Yeah, around high school, I started questioning a lot of things. Maybe I should go just just rewind just a tad. One of my earliest interests in life has always been consciousness. Now I call it consciousness. When I was a child, I didn't really understand what that was, like what that word was. But I remember this distinct moment asking my dad, walking to his office and asking him that I felt like I was a robot, like I was talking about my physical form, and there was something inside me moving the robot. And I could see through these eyes and look at this hand, and I started making these connections that there was something more going on internally. If you kind of know what I'm saying. So it felt like the physical form was an aspect of me, but it wasn't the me, that there was something internal moving. So that was something that always stuck with me. So moving forward to high school, that was always in the back of my mind. What is that thing? What's that thing that when I stare in the mirror and I look in the mirror and I look inside my pupils, I could feel something look back like this. These thoughts were always in my mind. So I started to rethink my concepts and ideas of Christianity. And of course, I started opening up some books, and it led me to a lot of philosophy and stuff like that. And of course, we know that a lot of the the Greek philosophers were also very much into mysticism. It's not always a popular thing. Back then, it wasn't a popular thing to discuss. Now it's become, pop culture to know that. Pythagoras and Plato and Plato's Republic and all that stuff. So I started reading more of that kind of stuff, and it kind of veered me away from the church. I started to question the concepts that I was taught. Also, I should note that my concepts and ideas of what I thought Christianity wasn't orthodoxy. It was very much steeped in Protestantism and Catholicism. So my ideas of what I thought Christianity were very much steeped in there. So a lot of the issues I was considering, like how to resolve, were not orthodox issues, right? So I didn't know to continue looking in my own backyard.
Yes.
So to answer your question, I started going down that path, and then I started getting into books like by Graham Hancock, Fingerprints of the Gods, questioning archaeology and all that stuff. So that took me into studying, I guess, what I would call now Hermeticism. At that time, I wasn't aware that that's what I was studying. And I guess that was like in my leaving high school, going into college, I started going there. But there was a couple of pivot points that are important. One other one to mention is the Federal Reserve. I remember sitting in that happened earlier in grade 7 in economics, and the teacher mentioning that the Federal Reserve wasn't part of the American government, and then just kept talking. And I was like, whoa, wait a minute. I put my hand up, and I remember my best friend from that, I still have him as a friend, Harry, still mentions this to this day. He goes, grade 7 economics, you put your hand up and you asked them, what do you mean it's not part of the government?
Right.
And everyone was like, what do you care, dude? Just keep talking, to the teacher. And the teacher's like, come talk to me after class. So after class, we started talking, and he started introducing me to what now I would say is at that time conspiratorial, but now we just know it as fact. Yeah. So all these together kind of took me away from the church, if that makes me sense. Because I was questioning reality. What is real? So
yes. And you find out, at that age, if you're already starting to, this seems odd, or something's not as we were told, you find out what the Federal Reserve is and how that, even if you don't understand the intricacies of it, it's like you generally find out what it is, and you're like, well, then something's not right. And then so it leads you down certain paths. Obviously that happened to me as well. I'd never like was able to get through the entire book of The Creature from Jekyll Island.
Oh, yeah.
But
yeah.
many of my listeners are going, "What? You didn't read that?" But I'm very familiar generally with what it's talking about, and I understand what happened. But that's kudos to you for being that young, going, "Wait, what?"
Yeah, I credit my dad again. So hopefully he checks out this episode when we go live on Tuesday. I'm going to throw it to him. But yeah, I credit my dad. He always asked me to ask questions.
Okay.
That was like, that's a governing thing. So when we get to that point, I'll talk more about questions.
And then so questioning reality, digging into consciousness, Hermeticism. I want to ask you about Jordan Maxwell too. I'll let you take this where you want, but what is Hermeticism? Where were you going at this point? What were you thinking? What were you learning? Because I until hearing you talk about it with Tommy, I wasn't too familiar with it.
Well, Hermeticism, that subject in general, it's a monster subject for a couple of reasons. It's shrouded in a lot of mystery. So sorry if I go off too far. Reel me back in. I'm just going to, because I have to connect a couple of dots here. It's kind of important. Yeah. So you're familiar with the term Gnosticism, and you know what Gnosticism is. Gnosticism and Hermeticism are kind of related, sort of, but also opposing. It's in some ways. So Gnosticism views things more of like this is a prison created by the deluge, and we're trying to escape things, like how it's described as the Matrix and all that kind of stuff. And it also makes a distinction between the God from the Old Testament versus the God from the New Testament, and it separates the two and says one was a bad guy, one was a good guy. Okay, we'll probably end up coming back to this at some point when we talk more about Luciferianism and this and that. But going back to answering a question about Hermeticism, you'll usually get, even if you look it up, you'll get a whole bunch of varying definitions of what it really means, other than when you're referring to the Kabbalion, which I have here, and we'll definitely be talking about that, and the 7 principles. Other than that, if you ask like 10 people, what is Hermeticism, you'll get very different definitions, right? For example, the scholastic version will give you a very basic, but a very easy to explain answer. So, sorry, I'm veering off, but let me just start from here. The simple answer is Hermeticism popped up in around the early stages of AD, as in terms of it being structured and being put out there as information during the Hellenistic period of Egypt. That's when you started to have Egyptian mysticism mixing in with Greek philosophy, as well as other forms of, Mesopotamian theology and all that stuff, kind of all mixed together. So you start to get this like mishmash and crossing of cultures because of Alexander the Great's Hellenic world. Of course, you have Jewish mysticism, which I left out. That's a very important one, which we now call Kabbalah and stuff like that. All of these are mixing together. Okay, so this is this time period. There's a lot of sharing of information. Also, you have Christianity popping up as well. So you have a form of Gnosticism and Hermeticism creeping its way into Christianity. So the simple answer is that you would get from someone at that time, they would say that Hermeticism was a structure of philosophical ideas that are shrouded in a lot of mystery and part of a secret society created by this guy called Thoth. You'll often hear Hermes Trismegistus. In Greek it would be Hermes Trismegistos, which means the Hermes thrice great. So when the Greeks got to Egypt, they were encountered with this Egyptian god Thoth. And Thoth is represented by the ibis. The ibis has the beak in the front.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
The ibis. And he's represented as the ibis in their mythology. So when they encountered the Greeks, when they encountered this story of Thoth, they said, "Oh, he's like our Hermes, but he's 3 times greater. He's thrice great." So hence Hermes Trismegistus. So the philosophy has a heavy Hellenic version of Egyptian mysticism, and this takes root in the 3rd century all the way to the 8th century. So there's that explanation. But if you believe in Hermeticism, it actually predates all of that, and it goes right back to almost like the creation of the universe, is how they would put it. Okay, and then if you go forward into the Middle Ages, so oftentimes you'll hear a scholastic breakdown. So for example, David Patrick Henry and Jay Dyer did a fantastic breakdown from the scholastic standpoint, where they break it down from the medieval period. So you also get characters like Sir Isaac Newton, for example, was one of the first to translate the Corpus Hermeticum, the Admiral Tablets, which is a key component to Hermeticism from Greek to Latin to English. Sorry, from Latin to English. So even here, we had a lot of these scientists practicing what we call alchemy, which is rooted in Hermeticism. So even how I'm trying to explain it to you, it sounds confusing. It is because it is, and it's shrouded in all this mystery. So depending on who you speak to and from which point that I just mentioned, they'll give you a different perspective, and it gets a little more confusing because by the late 1800s, you start to get the Theosophical Society come into play with Helena Blavatsky and all of them. And they start to take another twist to it. And even you can go back to like Bacon and the New Atlantis. So you have all these people giving you different perspectives on it. So if you've ever had, I think you've had Father Deacon Ananias and a few others discussing Gnosticism.
Yes.
Even if you ask them, it's a big mishmash. It depends on which Gnosticism you're referring to. So that's why I'm sorry if it sounds confusing, but it'll make more sense as we break it more down because it's kind of important, especially when we discuss who is Hermes.
Yeah, who we get into that right now.
Okay, so basically, Thoth and Hermes had a lot in common in the description. And Hermes, when we talk about Hermes, we're talking about the ancient Greek god Hermes, the messenger god. But there's a couple of interesting things about this character Hermes that are sometimes forgotten. Like for example, he's referred to as the trickster god. So this whole time that I'm just going to take a second here. I'll often make reference to how this led me to orthodoxy if I can thread through it, just to make it easier at the end.
Sure.
So I don't know how I didn't notice that this was not the answer, Hermeticism, because Hermes is a trickster god. So he's known as the trickster god. Same with like Loki in Norse mythology. And Thoth also had a trickster component to him as well. The other thing is, he's the mischievous god, as well as he's the god of transformation and transition, right? So those words are you should keep those in mind because the world we live in today, right?
Yes.
So this is going to walk into that occultism that leads to a lot of the stuff that we see today. Now, an interesting thing about that, he's also the god of banking. So Mercury is the Roman god version of Hermes. This is also very important because if you look at a lot of banks, I'm sure it's like that in the US, but it's all over Canada. They have the caduceus, right? Yep. There's a reason for that. Yeah. Now, this is an interesting factor because I started digging through some information because I knew you were going to ask about a lot of this stuff. So going back to transformation, transition, part of it was playing this mind game, this spelling, this play of words, spelling by casting a spell and using words. You could change people's ideas. Going into objectivism versus subjectivism, this is a key component to their magic. It's a lot of wordplay. And one of it is taking thievery and making it trade. When you're using business, right? Yes. So now you see where I'm going with this, right? So it also applies to how you transition through and how you move goods and ownership. So these are other components that are described by Hermes. Also, Hermes, a lot of people don't know. I didn't know. I actually looked it up a couple of weeks ago. Was actually one of the more ancient of the Greek gods. They even worshipped him in the Minoan Empire. So anyways, going back to the point, he's also the messenger. And as a messenger, you can tell people, you can give them messages to kind of guide them in the direction you want. So it's the beginning of using wordplay. So what you narrate, whatever you tell them as a story will become their narration, right? So you put this stuff together and you look at, so now we're skipping all over the place, which is my fault, not yours. We have these books called, so I'm going to come back to Hermes 1 second because I'm going to connect it to banking because it's kind of important. We have these volumes of books. Again, Hermeticism is shrouded in mystery because we also don't have a lot of books left from them. So we have these books called the Corpus Hermeticum. And they're brought to Florence by a Byzantine monk, they say. Some people say he was a philosopher. I'm not really sure. I couldn't really nail down a specific answer, so I don't want to mention his name. But in Florence, one of the ruling families was Cosimo de' Medici, and he's also one of the key bankers that rule the black nobility, which are referenced by John Coleman in the book of his book of the Committee of 300 and such. He's also one of the first to start the modern day banking system, and a lot of the issues we see globally are derivative from the black nobility in northern Italy, right? So he gets his translators to stop translating Plato and start translating the Corpus Hermeticum. Now, if you take everything I just said about description of Hermes, it sounds very much like how they manipulate and play the world.
Yes.
that's a key component to understanding all of this. So when I mentioned we should talk about Hermes, this is why, because actually this kind of made me go, whoa, okay, this, I didn't really understand this. Also, another key thing is angelo, angel, means messenger in Greek, right?
Okay.
But Hermes is a messenger god. So we also know the stories of the fallen angels.
Yes.
So I started to do some more deeper research and looking into a lot of the stuff talked about by Manly P. Hall. And there are many references to describing him as one of the fallen angels, or having been given the information from a fallen angel referred to as Piomandro. So even in the beginning, so now I'm jumping all over the place, so you could stop me at any point because it might get confusing. But there is a direct correlation between the story of Hermes Trismegistus. The description that Hermes is given by the Greeks isn't necessarily Hermes Trismegistus, but the description of his behavior, his psychology, is given to Hermes Trismegistus, Mercury, and Thoth. So I'll stop there because that was a lot.
No, that was a lot. No, that's okay. There's a lot of that you just said. I'll pull from some of the stuff I had just heard and where I wanted to take this. What is the Kabbalion?
Perfect. That's a key component to this. This is the majority of what I wanted to talk about, given the opportunity. Okay, the Kabbalion. So a lot of people that study Hermeticism from an academic level would say that the Kabbalion, they would write it off as kind of like, it's not. It's like it's cheesy, or it's a dumbed down version of sort of Hermeticism, more of a pop culture sort of Hermeticism, kind of how we would view The Secret in modern times. If you remember that book, The Secret, which has a lot to do with this.
Okay.
And how I saw The Secret myself.
Okay.
I saw it as cheesy.
Yes.
But the reality is, the Kabbalion is a really good, concise, condensed version of this, which is the Corpus Hermeticum.
Okay.
It's called the book, the Way of Hermes, but it's really the Corpus Hermeticum. And in this, it's because they're interrelated. So I do have to explain this. You have stories, they're told like as in fables, where Hermes or Thoth is having conversations with this divine. They call it the divine serpent, the Piamander, who represents the nous, but not the nous in how we see orthodoxy. So that's a key component for me, because that was always a big part of my fixation, was understanding nous. But I was looking at it from their standpoint, not from ours. So when I did come back to orthodoxy, so I'll put a point there when we talk about that. Ask me about nous, because it's important for me. So you have these stories, and it's also like stories of Hermes talking to Asclepius. So of course, Asclepius' symbol is the staff with the snake around it, which is the medical symbol, not the one with the two snakes. I don't know if you could see that. Those are the two snakes, like the caduceus of Hermes. Not that one. Asclepius has the one snake going around it. And there's conversations with Asclepius, there's conversations with Pat and a few others. And they're basically discussing things about the universe and how things are all mind. Everything's like a mental construct. Again, it takes us back to a lot of the stuff that you hear about, like from the woke types of people, like a lot of their stuff is derivative of this. Subjectivism is a key way of playing people. It's very much the case.
Yeah.
And this book is full of ways of doing that.
Okay.
So I'll get to this. So this book was published in 1908, I believe, and it says that it was written by the three initiates, but we now know almost for sure that it wasn't the three initiates that wrote it. It was written by William Walker Atkinson, who was a New Thought author from the late 1800s, part of the New Thought movement, like Emerson was. Emerson also was very much into a lot of this stuff. And so he wrote this book, the Kabbalion. Now, people don't know why it's called the Kabbalion. People assume that maybe it's a Hellenized version of Kabbalah, and that's possible. But I think personally, and not because I'm Greek and I have to make everything Greek, but I think his play was on the Greek word givo. Givo in Greek is a cube. So I got to credit my dad for pointing that out. And the reason why the cube is important is if you take the cube and you spin it sideways, it creates the Merkaba. And the Merkaba, what they call in New Age, is what we would call the Star of David. So it's cubism, which is why you hear Saturn and Saturnic cults. I'm sure you've heard of that. I think you've had Jamie on, Jay's
Yep.
wife. I'm sure she talked
Yep.
to you all about that. So that's the connection I make, because this leads into a lot of that Kabbalah worship, Merkaba worship. And what Merkaba is, the New Agers will call it the Merkaba, the star tetrahedron, which if you take the two-dimensional is the Star of David. So back to this. So this book outlines 7 key principles, which I lived by. And I just want to make a quick point that an important thing to consider is the 80-20 principle. I don't know if you're familiar with the 80-20.
Of course.
Okay.
Yes.
So that was one of the things that helped me get out of everything, is I always had these questions in my mind to always ask myself. And I always kept in mind that there's always the 80-20 principle everywhere. And that includes truth and lie.
Correct.
Truth and a lie. So in life, you'll always have these 80-20s. So I always knew that there was a way that there was 80% truth or 20% truth in this book. So I just wanted to point that out because it's one of the key components that brought me back to Orthodoxy. Anyways, back to the Kabbalion. There's 7 principles. And when you read the Kabbalion, it actually reads very logical. It's very rational. But not when you stop to think about it, especially from an Orthodox perspective. So the 7 principles are the principle of mentalism, correspondence, vibration, polarity, rhythm, cause and effect, and gender. So we're going to have to definitely put a note there. So the very first one is the principle of mentalism. So if it's okay, I'm going to really focus on this book because I think it's a key component to understanding things. And I think it's a dangerous book because it's really popular right now.
Yes.
Really super popular right now. And it was not popular at all when I was reading it, other than a few occultists.
Right. I think, let me see what your thoughts are here. Sure. With what happened since 2020, et cetera, even as Cyprian, our friend, said, even before 2020, he was saying we're entering the dim age and whatnot. And then we're entering this age of where mysticism and spirituality kind of take over what would have been called reason and logic, let's say. So when we're entering that age, I think the pop culture aspect of our society, especially the devouring mother, feminine aspect of our society, is going to gravitate towards things like this. Because in a way, it's anti-paternalistic or patriarchy. That's my thought.
I fully agree with that. Fully agree with that. And when we get to the end of gender, and when we start to look at a lot of these principles, you'll see that's literally what they've done. I love that breakdown. I think that I fully agree with you.
Okay.
You're also noticing that the people that are taking more of a masculine approach, if they're male, they are ending up at orthodoxy.
Right.
And people that are taking true femininity into regard are also ending up at orthodoxy. And some of them are making a couple stops on trad wife and those little blips along the road. And I think what you just said is extremely important and something that we must consider. Those that are a little bit more into subjective ways of thinking, they just kind of want to be very they want to practice solipsism, nihilism, and a lot of these things. So Father Seraphim Rose is another way I got out of this.
Yes.
And a lot of that, they're moving closer and closer to this stuff. So they're the ones I think that are gravitating to this because they could use it to play, and you'll see how. So mentalism, that's the first one, is the all is mind, the universe is mental. So all things are a mental construct. You already see how I can play with that, right? So my issue with that when I was reading this is okay, well, what gave birth to that? It's
right.
It's what gave birth, and they don't really have an answer. They'll play with these weird words even within this philosophical thinking. But keeping that in mind, when you go to read the Nicene Creed, you also get a version of the all, but it's not the all, it's God. And God says that he's in all things visible and invisible. Mm-hmm. So even when I went back and read the Nicene Creed, because I hadn't read it since I was a kid, I was like, oh, this is the Kabbalion stuff, but you included God. You see what I'm saying?
Right.
Because there's one key thing before I get into this that bothered me all in all about this stuff was it felt empty. If everything is if you're part of everything, you're part of the all, because the all is a key component of how they call God, then you're part of nothing.
Yes.
And if everything's beautiful, well, then there's nothing ugly. You don't know the distinction between the two.
Correct. Yeah. It, like much of modern progressivism, it erases differentiation.
Exactly. And that always bothered me about this principle of the all. So I'm like, what am I going to die and become what? nothing.
Yes.
So that bothered me. The second principle is correspondence. I'll go through these quick. Correspondence is a very important one because you hear it all the time. You hear as above, so below, as within, so without. You hear that all the time. You hear witches talk about it. You hear this guy, that guy, Satanist. Everyone uses that quote. The quote is supposed to have come from the Emerald Tablets, which we talked about earlier. Sir Isaac Newton, translated the Emerald Tablets. That's where it comes from. That's a key component because that's all they use that against Christianity to say when they say we're created in the image of God. They're saying, oh, that's just above, so below, as a below, so above. It's the same concept. But again, if you don't have a personal, like individualistic God, a real living God, well, then it becomes part of nothing. And we have that as Orthodox people. So we wouldn't look at it as above, so below in the same way they do. We would agree that we're in the image of God. And also, the Vitruvian man, the Da Vinci guy that stands like this.
Yeah, sure. Right.
So that right there is supposed to be a representative. You can measure the entire universe using those constructs in that diagram by using the proportions.
Yep.
That's also what is meant by as above, so below.
Guys, something really, really sad and bad happened, and some people need our help in the Orthodox community. You probably saw this online or on the news. I saw a few news reports, actually, and it really was more impactful there. St. Theodosius Russian Orthodox Cathedral has suffered a devastating fire and needs our help. It was originally founded in 1896 with financial assistance from none other than St. Tsar Nicholas II's Russian Missionary Fund. St. Theodosius is the mother church for all Orthodox Christians in Ohio. The cathedral itself was built and consecrated in the early 1910s, and for over 100 years has been a beacon of light to Northeast Ohio. Its distinctive onion domes, which we love, have been a staple of the Cleveland skyline for generations. It's even been in movies, which I saw this on the news report too, most notably the 1978 epic picture The Deer Hunter, starring Robert De Niro and Christopher Walken. Tragically, on Tuesday, May 28th, a fire broke out while a restoration crew was working on the cathedral. While no one was hurt, it nevertheless has left severe damage to the main dome and much of the inside of the church. As you guys know, I'm a firefighter, so I'm very well aware of just fires in a small part of a building, the smoke damage, the water damage that happens. A lot can happen, even if the fire ends up being somewhat minor. The damages are estimated at over $1 million. In a wonderful touch of divine providence, the lampada hanging in the altar in front of the icon of Christ's resurrection never went out, despite all of the water that the fire department used. I can tell you guys, it's thousands of gallons of water. Isn't this amazing? All of the wind that was in there, the flying debris around as they put out the fire. Truly a beautiful bit of consolation from our Lord Jesus Christ to the faithful at St. Theodosius. Now our brothers and sisters at St. Theodosius need our help. If you are able to donate, please visit www.sttheodosius.org fire restoration. That's STTHEODOSIUS.org/fire restoration, and help them out. And if you can't help monetarily, please pray for them and keep them in your prayers in this time of need. Thank you all, and God bless.
Okay, and so basically the principle of correspondence, as above, so below, basically it's a good way of using, it's an interesting principle for being able to measure things, as I said, with using the Vitruvian man and the proportions of the human body, which also fits in the image of God. That's how we would see it as Orthodox Christians, that we were made in the image of God. They would say that the human body is a measuring stick for the universe, which we would agree with, but our point of view would be different. You know what I'm saying?
There's always like there's kernels of truth in here, but there's always that. And as we understand with demonic stuff, they're not just gonna go, hey, I'm evil. Do you like it or not? There's always kernels of truth. But then there's it rubs up against Christ in a frictional way that's not quite holistic, if you will.
Exactly. And that's how they get you. Because if you just, tell all lies, no one's going to buy into it. But if you just kind of veer people off just a little bit, they'll kind of, slowly, a lot of those little small increments of veering off leads you into the wrong path altogether.
Yes, right.
So that's a key component to understanding all of what they're doing, really. And that's kind of something that surprised me, is that it was all in plain sight. Because as I read it now as an Orthodox Christian, because I haven't in a while, I've been avoiding all of this stuff, to be honest with you. And you asking me to do this, I was like, okay, I got to brush up on some of this. And I see why I'm afraid to even do this, because I'll talk about that later, maybe. The principle of vibration, that's the third one. That's where you get things like, well, first of all, it says that nothing's at rest, everything moves, everything vibrates. So we find that they'll even give that as a description of like how we view the atoms and all that stuff. And nothing is actually still, everything's in motion. They'll even try to play games and say like, it says in the Bible, be still and know. And they'll kind of like make it so that, you calm yourself down, bring your vibes, when they say good vibes, bad vibes, it comes from this principle of vibration. And they even in meditation, when you do a lot of that meditation in those schools of thought, they're always telling you, bring your mind to stillness, go to still so you can go into the void, to the nothing. It's always about going into the no thing. It's always that. So that's part of it. Another part of vibration is understanding that you can change your mental state. If you understand that it can change the physical state. So for example, water to gas, water in liquid form, if you vibrate it quicker, it becomes gaseous. If you slow it down, it becomes ice. And understanding water is a key component to their whole thing. That'll take me to a whole different other direction. So I won't get into water, but it's how they view things. A lot of these people, right? Because they're using the mental aspect that we talked about earlier, that all is mind. So if all is mind, everything is a mental construct. You can construct an image or a thought in your mind. You apply the vibration to it. So you see, this is how you get the law of attraction. You add that to it, the vibration. You can change your mood. You could change someone else's mood, and these are all truths. Like these are truths. Yes. These are true. But we still have the governing principle of Christ. So we definitely need to always remind ourselves of that. And then the other one would be the principle of polarity. Now, this is an interesting one in itself because everything is dual. Everything has a pole. Everything has its pair of opposites. Everything has like and unlike are the same opposites. So basically what it's saying, without just reading all, it's like if you take a thermometer, the example that they give here, a thermometer, at what point is it cold? At what point is it hot? It's kind of a relative thing. It's relatively speaking.
Yes.
So how do you get, it's basically cold is an absence of heat. Yes. So you often even, you'll hear this in Orthodox metaphysics.
Dark is an absence of light. Right.
Exactly. Right. Exactly. But we apply, of course, we have to apply the monarch to it. We have to apply Christ to it, right? At all times. And it kind of changes how you see that. Here, it's kind of telling you you're God. That's the premise of most of it.
Yes.
Everything is self-deification. It is the Luciferian story over and over again. You are as God. You could do these things yourself. And another thing that I like to point out about polarity, what's the difference between, and I gave this as part of my speech at an anarcho POCO conference. What's the difference between awake and woke? I don't like the term awake. Awake to what? Like to what degree? When are you fully awake? Like, I don't think I'm awake now. I'm awake to certain things as a degree, but I'm not fully awake. I don't know what it's like to be a good person. I'm not a good person. Like, you know what I'm saying? So awake to what? And then woke to what? It's like they're playing with like you take a battery and you look at the positive and the negative. It's part of the same thing, and you have to put the two together to create a spark. You can't separate the positive and the negative. And awoke and awake, I think, are the same thing. Okay. And it's this is how they're playing us. This is the playbook on how they're screwing us. You know what I'm saying? They're playing with these things to create different causations. So you see this in the woke ideology. You see this in communism. You see this in all of those isms. Every ism. I don't like isms, most isms. Anyways, back to the point. Now I feel like I'm preaching. Then you get to the principle of rhythm, right? And then this is an important one because rhythm, you know when to strike. If you take a pendulum and you swing it and you let go of it, the distance from the point that you let go is going to be equal to the point that it goes on the other side. Now, this is important for strategic planning. This is important for how you even view law of attraction stuff or anything like that. If you build someone, let's use it in the negative and how they're using it. If they build someone, then they climax people's mental state. Let's say 2016, Donald Trump gets elected. Everyone's kind of in this, and then all starting to fight. Culture war starts to come into play. Identity politics is everywhere. Blah, 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 blah. Now you throw a pandemic at it. Then you got everybody in the rooms. You have them wearing masks as like a ritual. You have them all separating their identity. You're creating a whole trauma on the entire globe at the same time. And as New Agers like to say, where attention goes, energy flows. They're aware of these things. They're controlling at all points your attention. And by the day, I'm referring to these Luciferian types, whatever you want to call them. Mm-hmm. So the rhythm, going back to the principle of rhythm, they know this. They know this. They let go of the pendulum at certain points in history, and they know when it's going to hit its crescendo, and that's when they attack. So when you have everyone climaxing with this identity politics, and everyone's at each other's throat, and then you throw them in the middle of a pandemic and you create this mass trauma worldwide, which is what it was, no matter what side of the fence you sit in, we all experience something at the same time. The entire globe at the same time. So take that back to manifesting, the way that they see things. Like visualize in your mental state. They talk about that. They talk about using mantras and using all these things. You hear these in the New Age. These things, think about that. We were all under lockdown. We were all in the situations prime picking for you to be viewing things on your gadgets. And if they're feeding you information, they can make you manifest chaos.
Yes. So
they're using these principles. So that's a good way you could use rhythm. Then I'll just go quickly. Then the principle of cause and effect. You're well aware of that. Like you can't deny that there's an effect, a cause and effect thing in your life. And then the last one's gender. Gender is in everything. Everything has a masculine and a feminine principle. Gender manifests on all planes. Now, this was one of the points where I started going, what is happening here? Because I started to notice the trans stuff turning up in 2016, right? And I've heard many since talk about the subject, and I think it's an important one because it goes into anything trans. And we talked about Hermes earlier. He's the god of transition, transitioning. I was giving examples of, see how earlier when I made reference to him taking thievery and calling it trade, right? And as a former libertarian, you know all about that, right? And the taxation system and how they play with you. Yeah. It's theft at all points. So this whole trans. I started, why are they playing with this gender where they know that this stuff is true? Then it took me back to Hermes and Aphrodite. You put them together and you have hermaphrodite. Now the concept and idea of the hermaphrodite is a very prevalent symbol amongst all occultists. It's a huge thing. Okay, so here we're just going to take a second because it's necessary. Basically, they kind of have this bizarre retelling of how we see things, and the we, I mean, our Orthodox Christian perspective, is that they view Adam before Eve as he was hermaphrodite. He was like a bisexual. He was both things. So at all times they want to go back to this primordial version of Adam, and you see this at the end of every civilization as it peaks. At the end of every civilization, you have this feminization of man, of masculinity, and you see that with Egypt, you saw that with Greece, you saw that with Rome. It's a consistent thing, and we're experiencing it yet again at the collapse of an empire, and it always introduces itself this way. Now, I don't think that's coincidental, and I don't think it's just human nature being this way. I think this is something that they're using these principles to manifest these things and manipulate us because they know psychology very well. So alchemy is where you get chemistry. Right? Because from alchemy it becomes chemistry, because they're trying to take base metals like I forgot the base metal that they use. Oh my God, it's so, and then they turn it into gold. What is it again?
Is it not aluminum?
No, not aluminum. Anyways, it'll come to me later. It's like so obvious. It's like so basic. I can't believe I'm blanking out. Anyways, the whole thing about alchemy is taking and transmuting something to gold. And they talk about that spiritually. Lead. That's it. Okay. Sorry. Lead. Turning lead to gold. That's the whole concept of the allegory of the alchemist. This is why you have a lot of these Middle Ages scientific minds like Newton exploring alchemy, because they're trying to do this transmutation. But it's an allegory according to the Hermeticists, because the allegory is the transmutation of the soul, taking you from a junky soul and bringing you to this gold. We call that theosis. That's how we view it. We view it as theosis, right? So again, I was keeping these things in the back of my mind. So when I went to Orthodoxy, I'm like, now it makes sense. It didn't make sense the way they were putting it, because it's still malleable. There's no objective truth to any of it. So I'm saying, if I know these tactics, I can manipulate you. So that's what alchemy comes from. Psychology is also derivative from right from this book. Right from this book. If you understand these principles, you can manipulate anybody. You can really, truly manipulate them. So going back to the hermaphrodite, that's a combination of Hermes and Aphrodite. And this is one of their goals, is to bring people to this primordial position of the original Adam. So this is one of the things that they constantly preach. This is why you see Baphomet, half male, half female. Also, Baphomet has 2 fingers up, 2 fingers down. He's pointing as above, so below, as below, so above.
Yeah.
All this stuff. So these things are very, very common in the occult sphere. And I have one more thing to say about the Kabbalion, but I'm going to give you some space because I just rambled like crazy, which will show you hypnosis. But if you had any questions, because I'm just jabbering.
Yeah. So I'm putting this all together. And I also want to get into the Jordan Maxwell name that was mentioned in the episode you did with Tommy, if that correlates or relates to some of this stuff. But some of it, it's like, Father Turbo has told us, again, all evil has kernels of truth in it because it has to. Again, when a car salesman who's dishonest and a thief essentially sells you a car, you get the car, it's just not exactly what you were promised. So I feel like that's a lot of this stuff. There's some like real actual spirituality and capital T true spiritual concepts, but it's almost removing Christ from it. And each person that gets to practice this, they become the Christ, and they get to somewhat either tell themselves that they know everything, or they can sell others on their class that they're going to teach them all this spiritual stuff. So it's like there's some sort of it's like a perversion of true kernels of reality into this somewhat occultic, quote unquote, mystical and what would end up being demonic and satanic spirituality. Is that correct how I'm seeing this?
Absolutely. It's 100% correct. And it's why I always refer to the bad guy as the great deceiver, because that's what he is. And that's what Hermes was, a trickster. So at all points, they are doing exactly what you just described.
And that's all rooted in pride still. So the irony of some of this, we're in the month for it right now, but the irony of some of this is that they're like, this is all love, and I'm going to show you how to do this. Like, yeah, but you think that you're like the top of the food chain here on some spiritual level, which is rooted in satanic pride. Am I missing that?
No, not at all. You nailed it. Actually, you even nailed it when you were on my show, and I asked you about libertarians and their view, and he said, well, they do have a religion. So that concept and the way you described that was the first thing that popped in my mind. We said like they've done this in every subject. You pick a subject, they've done this, right? It's always done this way. We are egoistic humans. By our fallen nature, we have massive egos, and we love that, right? So if I fuel that, you're inevitably going to go there. If I could tell you, you create all things, you're the creator of all things, and then they want to worship the creation. They never worship the creator, ever.
Correct.
Ever. They don't.
Yes.
Ever.
Yes.
So this is a key component to how they create this this illusion of reality, this simulacrum, this false reality of all the things that we see around us. Take it back to you internally know when you're lying. Like, we've all experienced that time when you're a kid and you're lying. Only you know you're lying, right? Only you know you're lying, but you know you're lying. So when you look at a male with a penis and you say, no, that's a woman, because you've been trained to say that I'm pride. That's a woman. What are you talking about? She identifies as a woman. That's a woman. Inside you know you're lying.
Yes.
Like, I bet you if you went into that person's head, none of them will be like, unless they're very ill, they would be like, yeah, that's definitely a woman. Like, you know what I'm saying? They're not going to do that, right? So when they put on masks and all that stuff during the whole COVID thing, we were doing the same thing.
Yes.
You knew you were lying. You're lying, and you internally know, and that creates a schism within you. It creates trauma.
Yes.
That your internal self knows you're lying at all times. And as you recall, when you were a kid and you lied, there was the one day where you either gave it up or you made it a lifestyle. If you made it a lifestyle, you ended up becoming a sociopath of some sort. You know what I'm saying?
Yes. Yeah.
So that's what this entire thing is based on. It's based on self-worship, worship of the self. You're the most important. And as Father Seraphim Rose correctly illustrates, and he was a game changer.
Yes.
Describing solipsism and its connection to nihilism and all that stuff. This is what they're practicing. This is what they're preaching. They just call it different names.
Yes.
They just change the names and just give it an ism. Most isms are a version of this.
Yes.
So even Catholicism, you could even go there. It's a perversion of the truth at all times.
Mm-hmm.
And that is their tool. And that takes me to the one last thing I wanted to read out of this, because it fits perfectly with kind of what you were saying. I don't know why I didn't pick it up. Like, I don't know why I didn't. Maybe I wasn't ready, because now I'm rereading this stuff and I'm like, Malaka, it's right in front of you. It's like there's parts where it talks about the Luciferian experiment in like Manly P. Hall's ridiculous book of all of this crap. And like I was going through a lot of this stuff, and I was going through the Melchizedek schools of thought, and not connecting it to how we view it as Christians, and saying I've been duped. I've been duped. Anyways, the one part in here, it pretty much tells you to go out there and manipulate people. Okay, so it's hidden in a way that's disguised. So back to the mental aspect, it breaks down the mental nature of the universe, and it goes not only many of the mental states, etc., but of one self. One second. Of oneself to be changed and transmuted by hermetic principles, but also the state of others may be and are constantly transmuted in the same way, usually unconsciously, but often conscious by some understanding of the laws and principles in this book. So basically, it goes further on to tell you that if you don't do that, like if you don't manipulate someone that's allowing you to manipulate them, then you're doing something bad because you know better than them. So we know that the ruling class views us as these dumbasses.
Absolutely, yes.
And this is where they, this is where they get it from. They get it from this. They're almost told, like in Plato's Republic, shout out to Jay Dyer, his explanation of making me rethink Plato's Republic was very helpful, extremely helpful. And in there, he talks about the philosopher kings, and that they have to create this environment where only they know, like the ruling class, and then they treat everyone else like the useless eaters. This is where the terminology and all this stuff comes from. Yes. So if you look at it that way, you kind of look at it from the perspective of a bad father who is manipulating their child, rather than a good father, which we have, who's like, you're not ready for the keys, my friend. I'm not going to give you the keys to the Lamborghini until you know how to drive the Lamborghini. Yes. So all these manifestation tools, all these manipulation tactics, all the psychology that we just discussed, it's not like our father would say those aren't true. He would most certainly say, yeah, I built this. It's definitely true. But you're not ready to take on the role of being a deity. Like you need to check in with someone. This is why the saints always talk about that and all that stuff. So
yeah, it's interesting. I'm just putting so much of this together and thinking of it through an Orthodox lens, or trying to, and the appeal to the stuff that's in that book, the Kabbalion, versus, let's say, the appeal of Orthodoxy. Well, the stuff that's in that book's going to obviously appeal to your sinful, fallen human nature, if you will. It's like, that's not hard, none of that. But then Orthodoxy is tough. You know, of course, you and I spoke offline. Get ready for the hardest year or year and a half of your life. Beyond that, like your whole lifetime now is fasting, prayer rules, sacrifice. It's stuff that's somewhat against our fallen nature, to where it's like, we call it the struggle, right? And the ultimate struggle is being what monks and saints were, experiencing the ultimate sacrifice in life. And the people that go on to be experts in the Kabbalion, it's like, well, they get to rule over other people. So they've somewhat the only thing they've sacrificed is their soul with Christ, and everything else they can revel in, it seems like.
Yeah, absolutely. Well put. And that is exactly the issue with the book, this book in particular, because you asked about this book particular. Like a lot of people that would probably watch this would say, I got it all wrong, and that's not correct, because they would be taking more of an academic approach, and they'd be correct to reference the Corpus Hermeticum. This is a condensed version of it. So it's pretty much like giving a monkey a gun. Okay. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
So this is so simplified and so simple that if you don't have any morals or ethics, or if you view that you do have morals and ethics, but you have nothing to check it in with, like, where are you getting your morals and ethics from?
You can craft it through this book.
Exactly.
And it's subjective at this point too. So exactly. There is no true good or evil or truth or false. It's just like, well, this is subjective. And then you can be an expert and write that you're a spiritual gangster on your profile.
Exactly. Nailed it. And if you look at the non-aggression principle, I was talking to a libertarian that was over my house a couple of days ago, who's on the cusp. He's on the cusp of questioning things. He's so on the cusp. He's a great Mexican, and I mentioned that because like he's from Mexico, so they have a different perspective of libertarianism than Americans and Canadians. That's why I made the distinction. He's so close. Oh, Max, you're so close, buddy. So basically, when you look at NAP is, I think you've mentioned it, a couple of people of your guests have mentioned it. It's removing Christ from the concept of turn the other cheek and do unto others.
And for those listening, the NAP is the non-aggression principle, which is the foundation, if you will, the cornerstone, quote unquote, of libertarianism. It's Christianity without Christ.
Exactly, and I reference you often the last couple of streams I've had because that you really put that well. And when you ask them, well, what is aggression? Because to someone, misgendering them is aggression.
Yes, yeah,
right?
Not giving them food stamps.
Exactly.
You don't like welfare? Well, that's aggression towards poor people.
Exactly.
Right.
So it leaves it up in the air. There's nobody
Subjective.
there. It's totally subjective, and that's really their whole play, their whole entire play. So when you're Orthodox, and bringing it back to Orthodoxy, they literally inverted everything. Because when I took all of those 7 principles and I flipped them, I inverted the inversion. That's why I call my tagline "Re-engineering their social engineering," for a couple of reasons. But this is what I was doing. I started using that, and like, let me use these things against them. Let me flip this and see what I get. And when I flipped it and I started to look at it from a different perspective, it started to lead me in the direction where I find myself today.
Orthodoxy.
That's right.
And we have about, 8 more minutes. And I kind of want to get into this as we end this, because I think this is part of what you've done, what I've done. And as we've discussed these topics today, you've bounced through these topics and this lifestyle and learning these things. But as Father Turbo has said, seek truth and you will find Christ. Kind of sum that up and how it worked for you.
Absolutely. I've done a couple interviews in the last little while, and I've always ended it with talking about truth. To me, that was my guiding principle from the beginning. When I even got into any of this stuff, I was very careful because I knew this is a dirty, slippery slope. I could be taken down at any point. And my GPS coordinate was always truth. I made myself a promise. I don't care where it leads me. I will not be dogmatic about anything. All I'm interested in truth, and I don't care at what cost. And I came up with an axiom that was one of my very first videos that I did in 2009, 2010, when I first did the study of stuff. And it's really one of the key components that brought me back. And it's the right answer to the wrong question remains a wrong answer. Spend more time with the question. So I always found that helped on bringing me back. So I just kept asking questions, and I never said, okay, I found the answer. This is, even now with Orthodoxy, someone asked me, do you still apply that? I'm like, absolutely. If I find tomorrow that Orthodoxy doesn't make sense, I'm out.
Right.
I'm out. I'm out. I'm looking for it.
Yes.
I'm going to tell you right now, I'm actively looking for the flaw. I am looking day and night. Where are they wrong? Where are they wrong? And the other thing is that about truth is I always concentrate on who I was, not what I was, because who you are. And I make this reference at the end of my solo album, who you are before you were born. This is before I was Orthodox. Who you are before you were born and who you'll be after you die is the who that you are currently. And that matters more than what you are, because what you are can be easily manipulated. Why are you white? Are you male? Are you this? But that's not who I am. And now my definition of who I am is I am created in the image of God. And my goal is to find my way back to that. And that's who I am.
Yeah.
So those to me are truths.
Right. Well put. And I think a lot of people listening, as you know, you've seen the tales of the libertarian to Orthodox pipeline. And when I'm on other shows, why do you think that is? And I do say, for a lot of libertarians, this is the case. It was me, obviously, and yourself. We are looking for truth. We're not dogmatic where it's the Libertarian Party or nothing. It's like we're looking for truth. And I cycled through that and then kept digging elsewhere and went through the Yarvin and reactionary stuff. Those things I'm trying to find. There's elements of truth in all of these things. And then that led to here. And it seems like, they tell you when you get baptized, in a sense, welcome home. And it feels that way. And like you said, I had Jeannie, Dr. Jeannie Constantanu on before, and she said, I think it was her that said, someone asked her, well, what if we discovered proof that Christ was killed and didn't resurrect? Would you still be Orthodox? It's like, well, no, probably not. I mean, that's like, if you discover something that's not true that we all know as truth, well, then no, you change your scope on things. But we still haven't, so far we know that as the truth, and so that's where we're at.
I fully agree, and I spend a lot of time looking for it. I'm not going to lie. I'm looking for the flaw, and I've gotten to the point where I just can't find any.
Yeah, well, so far I keep looking, and then it's me, like
yes,
the flaws with it.
Yes. Oh yeah, I'm super flawed.
Yeah, flaws. I remember Father Turbo told me once, I love you, but at some point you're going to be really mad at me, and I was like, why would I be mad at you? If I get that urge, I need to look in the mirror. That's who to be mad at, not you. And so, you start thinking, I think I have found a flaw. And then you start researching a little further. It's like, nope, that's me.
Do you mind if I just say something really quick about Father Turbo? Because Father Turbo, yourself, and Justin Marler are key reasons why I'm back here. The very first person I would say that piqued my interest was just Jay Dyer, because he was mentioning it in 2014, and he helped along the way. But the point that tipped it, that went like, just go, was when you had Father Turbo on, and I mentioned it a couple times when we've talked, and you guys were talking about punk rock, and then he's talking about Cro-Mags. I'm like, what is going on here? Who is this? I had known who he was, but I hadn't heard him talk. So I just started to devour his material. I was already a fan of yours, but then I started watching more of the Orthodox stuff than anything else. And watching you question things, and the kinds of questions you were asking were like questions I was asking as someone that I thought I knew what Orthodoxy was. I was like total cradle. I'm like, this guy's asking legit questions. I'm like, okay, that's cool. So then Justin Marler, his story just shook me to the core. And then just to speed it up, Father Turbo, having him on my show, at the end of the interview, he shook my world with a couple of things he said. And when he pointed out that my grandfather whispering to himself was I realized was him saying the Jesus prayer, and he goes, "That's why you're here. You know that, right?" And I'm like, I kept talking. He's like, no. That's why you're here. You know that, right? Like, kind of like I wasn't getting it. And I was like, oh, and it hit me like, seriously, it felt like someone smacked me upside the head. And even now, when I message him for like advice and stuff, he answers with one or two words.
Yes. Yeah.
And then I walk away going, what? And then my entire week are those two words. And I'm like, what is he doing to me? What is he doing to me? Like, what is he doing? Oh, he's like, read this prayer. I'm like, read your prayer.
Yep.
And then I'm reading it and I'm like, oh my God, this is happening. Yep. It's like, so shout out to Father Turbo, seriously, to yourself and to Justin Marler, for helping me along the way, and Jay Dyer for going, hey, maybe you should look over here.
Yes, yeah. The Jay, Justin for certain, and obviously Father Turbo have all been massive for me as well. Just finding Justin's Death to the World and Youth of the Apocalypse, it's just. It's just, that for people from the subcultures that you and I came from, boy, did that stuff like grab us in. And the reissue coming out soon for Justin's book.
Yes.
So I'll let you, in closing here, plug anything you'd like of your work, your site, your stuff, and then we'll get you out.
I'll keep it simple. Study of Stuff or Mano Elia on everything. You can find us up on my website, manoelia.com. SOS Radio every Sunday. We're expanding. We have some big news coming soon. We're building something of a network. We're trying to, so kind of stay tuned, everyone. We're kind of trying to solve some issues that I see, like you had Twitter situations in the past, and that wasn't coincidental. In the past, we've had like a lot of people get just taken off, like their websites taken down. Jay Dyer's site got taken down. Mr. Alex Jones got booked a couple times, this and that. So we're going to try to solve some of these things. A lot of people out there are doing that, but we're trying to create like a network / sort of like a record label boutique of Orthodox content creators. Yeah. And we're trying to build something. That's all I'll say for now, but stay tuned. It's a little bit different than other people have designed. It's going to be off on blockchain so that they won't be able to do that, and a couple other factors. The model is very much Orthodox. I designed it before I was Orthodox, and it's decentralized. We don't own anyone's masters, none of that stuff. So we're not applying any of that garbage, but we are building a network. And I think in a couple of weeks, because we have a big move now, we're going to be doing our first network sort of thing. I'm not going to say much for now, but you'll be getting an invite and a bunch of others for many things to kind of join on that. So I'll plug those things.
Wonderful. I will. I look forward to that. Mano Elia, thanks for being here on Counterflow.
Thanks so much for having me, Buck. Honestly, it's been a bit of pleasure and kind of like a pivotal moment for me because I've been watching your show forever. So it's great to be on it. So thank you, brother.
Yeah, thank you. There was a lot there. I hope you guys learned some things. This might be the kind of episode that you have to listen to a few times to get everything Mano was talking about. I really enjoyed our discussion. And let's see, next week going to be a good one. We're going to actually get more. We're going to touch on some of these similar topics, and it's with a very sweet and great person. A nun is going to be on the show. We will be discussing the themes in her book, and you'll just have to wait till next week to see. Guys, I did a live stream on this past Sunday evening. It's on the YouTube page, and if you subscribe to our YouTube page, you'll get notifications when I do things like that. I rarely do live streams, but that was a lot of fun. There was a decent amount of you guys in there. So I think I will be doing those more often than not. Let's say it's been a long time since I've done one, and I did enjoy it. It was called Debates, Debacles, and Democracy. Oh, and the VP. The Prudentialist and Jason Moranchuk from the 2-Bit Podcast. They were both my guests. We talked about this crazy debate we saw the other night between Biden, or what was left of Biden, and Donald Trump. The VP spot, just some political things I don't always get into on this actual podcast. So in a live stream, kind of go outside of some of the topics we usually talk about. So it's up there on the YouTube page. Give that a look if you'd like. Until next week, you guys have a good one.
You get split in half, but I call him the hologram brass. But I am the center inside the placenta of math. You clash with cyanide gas and die fast. Rhythmical equivalent of solids, liquid, and gas. We smash your sinus with the power of Lord Titus. But I am the virus inside of the iris of Cyrus.
Like the sound of the Counterflow podcast? Our audio production is provided by Podsworth Media. Check them out at podsworth.com.